Welcome back to another episode of Out of Blank Podcast. Mr. Coogan, it is a pleasure to have you back. It's been a year. I think it's been a good solid year, or hopefully it was good for you. I mean,
Yeah,
uh,
it's been a good year for me.
seems like it went by in a blur, to be honest with you.
Everything seems like a blur
Well,
these days.
would you like to reintroduce yourself to everyone out there listening?
Sure, I'm Peter Coogan or Dr. Peter Coogan, if that makes you feel better. I am currently the communication lab coordinator at Washington University in St. Louis at the Brown School. So I work with students on papers, presentations, academic skills, and academic integrity, how to be a better student. But I'm on this podcast because of my background in comics and superheroes. My book, Superhero Secret Origin of a Genre, is actually getting a reissue very soon. And I also run the Comics Arts Conference. I'm one of the co-founders of it and co-chairs of it. I run it along with my co-chairs at the San Diego Comic-Con and at WonderCon.
How do you think people perceive comics? Like on the surface level, obviously it's a very big cultural trend right now.
That's a good question. And in a sense, you would think it's changing. And it has changed for a lot of people. Um, but other people haven't paid any attention to it and don't really know that it's changed. There's still the association with superheroes, which is factually inaccurate because the biggest comics publisher now is Scholastic, you know? And most people who read comics read them electronically, not in paper form anyway. And so the idea that and they read them in, trade paperbacks or longer form stories or ongoing stories that, don't get collected. My daughter, who's 17 years old, loves comics, but not Marvel or DC and not superheroes, but all kinds of manga and online stuff. And she comes across them through all sorts of different apps. And that's her relationship. And she has a really solid relationship with comics. In fact, her and her sister are making a comic book right now. And it was fun because they drew the page and I got into critiquing it from a sequential art perspective. And they improved it, but they are doing that and they don't have the background with comics that I do at all. They have their own because, I'm 58 and they're, 17 and 21. So the there isn't a way in which people perceive comics. There's many ways in which many people perceive comics. And it's different now. One of the things is it's kind of like we're in another golden age of comics, or we're always in a golden age of comics in some ways, because the ways people can get them, the kinds of people who can participate in them, who can create them, who can buy them, who can sell them, who can read them, it's really kind of everybody now, but not everybody knows it. Although I'm going to make an analogy to gaming. How many people think of themselves as gamers? Well, not that many. But how many people play games? Farmville and, I forget what that one was called during COVID, the one on the little island. You know,
The Clash of Clans is a big one.
yeah, yeah, gosh, exactly. And my wife in bed to go to sleep has a little, it's like Tetris, but it's in a square rather than a tube, you know? And so she moves the pieces around and but she does that. It's a sleeping aid, right? It's a relaxation aid because it makes you focus. And my daughter also has a sleep aid game, that again because she has to focus on it. So my daughter's actually going to college for game design. She's a gamer, but so is her mother. But only one of them thinks of themselves as a gamer. So that's, I think, people's relationship with comics now is that people encounter them in lots of different ways. And there is still an identity, sort of Scott McCloud's tribal notion, but there's also just ways in which people encounter comics just in the course of their day and enjoy them that way and just think of them as another entertainment medium. And that, of course, is kind of where we wanted to go the whole time, is just to make comics normal. And we're kind of there. but I don't think we've sort of all realized it.
Does it shift between generations? Have you noticed the comics change with the generational, I guess, differences that we like my generation compared to my parents' generation compared to my grandparents' generation? I mean, looking back at older comic books, I'm interested in the more I wouldn't call, I mean, not just the superhero ones, but more on the basis of the ones that have more of like what seems like real kind of depictions of the times, whether it's fighting the Nazis, whether it's something that's going on, something that I love history. So that's where my interest is obviously going to be. Spark Graphic Universe is a good example. With their comics based on lore, mythology, I find those pretty interesting, or just their art style. I wouldn't know if you would call them comics, but to me, they're comics because they're that same quality that you would see in maybe of the stereotypical comic book. But I'm wondering if with today's generation, I have a lot of friends that are interested in Naruto, some of my favorite. They're animes. I don't know if you'd call them comics, but you can get paper versions of them. Maybe my depiction of comics is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm Scott McCloud on the definition of comics, sequential artistry, or sequential art, art and sequence. But yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing you always have to remember is that distribution. This is always true of any art form, is that distribution matters, right? Distribution is the way in which people experience things because that's literally how they get them. And so just like that idea that or the fact that Scholastic is now the country's biggest publisher, you know, that's because they already had a way of distributing books, right? And then, they brought in like Bone. Bone was one of Scholastic's biggest first graphic novels, right? Because people liked Bone. I got Bone just, comic book shop, but it doesn't make sense to sell it that way in the single issues, right? It makes sense to sell it in the big old book. And that's how my kids encountered Bone and loved it, just loved it, right? But they got it at school. And then once that's established, now there are comics artists who, their primary market is through Scholastic, which is fantastic. And um, so every generation, it changes the way we encounter any medium, right? Um, but what that also means is that the range of genres and story types and creators is so big now. And it's just a fantastic thing. And I really think that we as a society and as people who identify with comics, that's something I think that we're kind of again, we're not that conscious of. Um,
Well, do you think people actually soak in anything from comics when they read them? Like the average surface level people when they're reading a comic, they're not just getting a fun story or depiction. I mean, I see many things that have changed. That one of the important one I would think is usually you wait for like a weekly release or something like that. It's like with TV shows, everyone gets excited for that next thing. But now you can buy a lot of the older Spider-Man comics all in like a giant book where they have every single issue in there, and it's like you're compacting all that fun into a short amount of time. You get addicted for a week and then you never touch it again.
yeah. Well, that's true of, again, what you're talking about is distribution, right? So think about, TV, right? I just got done watching season 5 of Fargo. Fantastic show. We watched it weekly. On the other hand, I'm still in the first season, second season of Lock and Key, which I've been watching for a couple of years now because I watched it for a while and we were watching it as a family and then kind of dropped it. And now I've come back to it to finish it. Everybody else finished it. And so that's a different way of doing that. And so with comics, I just read the Department of Truth, and I read it through Hoopla, through the library, right? And so that's been out for years now. I think the last one came out in 2022, or Once and Future King about King Arthur. And, I read that when it was over. So, like, again, to my point is that comics now as a medium are like every other medium. And there's different ways you can do. There are people who do daily comics, on the web. There are people who never read a comic that's in paper. Um, the comic book shop is a medium of distribution, and you know, just like we don't get our television over the air, when they went to digital over the air TV, I don't know, they just didn't build the antennas into the TV. And so we could only get some of the channels. So now we never watch over the air television because we just watch through the internet. So that's true of comics as well. We have many different ways of getting them, different schedules. It's wonderful that you can go back and find older things collected. There is a difference, though, in reading things weekly versus reading things in a collected way, because when you read things weekly or view things weekly or listen to things weekly, podcasts, you're experiencing it as you go. And so it sort of accretes. Whereas when you binge, you could think of collections or graphic novels as binging, right? You have that more concentrated experience, but like you said, then you put it away and you move on to something else. And it doesn't have that sort of organic relationship with your brain, where things because they're linked to when you read them, and reading and rereading. Um, back when I bought comics weekly, you'd read them and then reread them. And so, whereas, now if you buy comics in in graphic novel form or collections, you're unlikely, because you always have something else to read, you're unlikely to read and reread things. So I think you're absolutely right. But it's my point about distribution is key to the way people experience art.
You think that not just the platform of distribution, but also how the industry's kind of changed? Do you think it's more marketed instead of being on the essence of maybe an actual story? Like before, it gave you things to connect to, like Stan Lee was the creator, or with a bunch of other creators that were creating these independent universes or creating these franchises that eventually obviously get exploited by whatever you want to call capitalism. But if you really look at like, I don't know, everything now, like there's like 50,000 games that you can get for an iPhone on Naruto or any of these things. And they're just spending money apps. That's all they are. They might be fun and entertaining, but it's all about here's 10.99 for a gem pack, and damn if I don't spend 10.99 on a gem pack. But it's become more commercialized, and I had a buddy of mine mention this to me where he would ask, "Is it an authentic app?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, it's not going to scan your credit card or anything." He goes, "No, but a lot of these apps just market the fandom, and they don't really care about the essence of the actual comic." And I realized I might not even be a true fan of some of these animes I enjoy. They just might be things I liked when I was a kid and I still enjoy, but not to the level of these guys do.
Yeah, well, uh, again, my sort of through point is that comics are like anything else now, and and I think that's good. Yeah, there's commercial exploitation of IP, but that's universally true. And so, um, then, if that exploitation of IP allows for continued production, or other income streams that then allow people to keep making stuff, then that's good, because it's sort of like, with music now. It used to be that musicians went on tour to sell records. Now they release records to sell, tickets to their
Yeah.
concert. And that's everybody. I doubt anybody is really making money off of music anymore, because like I don't we have some CDs, but not anything from the last 10 years.
You can go to a Pizza Hut and find the jukebox thing and put some quarters in.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I get my music through Amazon Prime Music because I'm already paying for it. I understand that I'm obeying the monopoly, but we got it. Jeff Bezos figured it out, right? Even if you don't like it, we still do it. We got it for the delivery, and then I also watch stuff on Amazon Prime, and now I don't have Pandora or Spotify. I just have Amazon Music. So that I remember years ago wishing there was a Netflix of comics. And then Comixology kind of came into that, but its purchase model, made it less attractive. I wanted access to kind of what was current. I wouldn't have minded, and like Marvel had a subscription app, and DC took longer to get theirs in, and Marvel's was clunky, and uh, I got a tablet. I got a 10-inch tablet, which is the size of a comic book. And that's mostly how I read comics now. Which means that the double page spread is kind of dead, until I think that'll change when again the distribution medium changes. I remember years ago somebody predicted you would have a piece of basically like a plasticized piece of paper that you could fold and make different sizes, and that it would have these little balls in them, black and white ball, black and white, black on one side, white on the other, and then anything you could put, attach a drive, it would have a drive attached to it, and it would flip basically pixels, ink pixels. And that would be black and white. And they can do that with color. And when that comes into play, where you're actually having a kind of foldable plastic thing that's about, I don't know, 12 by 14 or something like that, then we'll get back to the double page spreads, and it'll be a different thing. Or, once we get really wearable technology that's comfortable, the double page spread will come back in that way. So it's kind of like splash pages used to be the big thing, right? So you'd have a cover, and then you'd open it up as a splash page, because when you're buying it off the stands, opening it up to look at it, they'd want you to get excited about it. But then, remember Marvel would release like 6 pages, right? As a teaser, and then they started to do it. So really the big thing would happen on that 7th page. So you'd get led into it. And so that would change stories. Or, the 6-issue arc. Well, why do they tell stories in 6 issues? Well, because that collects to a nice size. So all art forms are driven by restriction, restriction of form, restriction of medium, restriction of distribution. And that shapes storytelling. And so comics are, television is different now than it was in the 70s, and comics are also different than they were in the 70s.
Do you think that this form of distribution that we have today is better than the one that we had in the past? Not just the ease of access to comics, but I think it takes a lot of the stigma out too of
Yeah, yeah.
the culture of it.
Well, same thing again. I apologize for continually talking about other
We're
media.
going to ask about Scholastic. I feel like you have a grudge against them.
Oh no, I don't have a grudge against them. It's quite the opposite. My point is that when people think about comics publishers, they are not paying attention to the actual like money of it.
My friend's series just became a board game. I was pretty happy about that. I watched that growth happen. Yeah, it's called Fae. It's about like mystical creatures and things of that sort. But yeah, he's apparently it's very, very popular. It's kind of like a version of Dungeons and Dragons, but better. It gives free creative expression to that. And I was there when he first started his comic, and I had him on the show. And next thing you know, see, 4 years later, he's got this board game out there now, which is interesting to me because I don't know. I mean, I support anybody that's doing their own art, whether whatever form, whatever medium. But yeah, I have a lot of comic friends that are just they do so much work, and I realize how much effort they put into it whenever I get a design done or something like that, which makes me only want to buy the paper version, not the digital version.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. So I like the range of media now, the range of possibilities for encountering all art, right? Um, it is different because going to the comic shop and comic shops were a great thing. But remember, comic shops came about because of distribution, right? They weren't some natural thing. It was um, when direct distribution came about and the comic book shop owner would take the risk by buying the comics, um, and then selling them. And that changed their relationship with the publishers. And really, that in some ways, comic book shops were terrible for comics because it took the comics out of the grocery stores and 7-Eleven and convenience stores where people used to encounter them, right? That's how I started reading comics is we stopped at a gas station and my mom in California in 1974, and my mom let us buy comics.
I think that's how I got my first comic.
Yeah, that wasn't my idea. That was her idea. And that wouldn't happen now, right? On the other hand, I my mom died in 2002 and we went to her house and cleaned it out and we, threw a bunch of stuff in the dumpster, including like she had all these pictures of all these trips she had taken and we didn't take them and we didn't know who the people were in the pictures, and so we kept the family pictures but we tossed all of that stuff. And I recently sold off my comics because I had a 5 by 5 by say 8 stack of boxes of paper, and I wasn't doing anything with them. They were just sitting there. I kept Captain America 176, which was the first comic book I bought, and I kept the Hulk 181 because it's a key. It has Wolverine, and I sold off everything else. Um, and it's weird not having them there, but on the other hand, I didn't do anything with them anyway. And so not having, when I tossed my mom's house like that, I decided that I never wanted another thing. I never wanted anything. By thing, I mean a physical object that I have to take care of.
Minimalism?
Hmm?
Minimalism?
Well, not exactly. It's just because I have lots of stuff. I only want a thing that I'm going to use and reuse, but mostly it's like with books and comics and movies and that kind of stuff. I'm happy to have just digital access to all that stuff now because when you move, I don't know if you've ever moved long boxes. I moved next door one time. Um, I was living in a house and my lease ran out and I got into the house that was literally right next door. So I moved my comics and I carried long boxes. And that was a lot. It kind of blew out my arms for the day. And not having to do that is great. Having to just to be able to dip into a stream, to be able to get things through the library, through Hoopla on my tablet. Uh,
See, we're the opposite in that. I love the collectible stuff. I think when they put numbers on certain things, I think that only makes the whole collector's market go up even more because people go, I got to collect them all. I got to do something. McDonald's does that whenever they do Happy Meal specials or something like that.
yeah. And there is a certain kind of fetishization of material objects that I see stuff and I'm like, ooh, that'd be nice to have. But then I think, well, where am I going to put that and what am I going to do with it? And when I dust my bookshelves, I kind of think, why do we have these books? Well, now they're this object that I have to take care of. I when I was 2, my parents said happy birthday to me and I stomped off. And I'm still like that. I actually don't like gifts. I don't like gifts because for somebody to be able to get a gift correct, right? To get a gift right, what do I need? I don't need anything. So somebody buying me a gift, they're almost always going to get it wrong. And then I have to do something with it. So what they've done is they've given the ability.
That's so relatable. I'm so sorry. That's so relatable to me. It's every Christmas. I'm like, I said nothing, and they get you something that you have to have in return. I'm still got to return a pair of shoes that don't fit, and I'm like, I don't have the fucking time.
Yeah. Did you know that Christmas is the greatest destroyer of value in the world?
That's terrible. It's supposed to
Because
be
if
joy.
somebody buys you a gift and they pay $50 for it, right? But you value it at $25. Then by buying it and giving it to you, they've destroyed $25. This is an economics thing. And like a friend of mine will, publish a book and they'll be like, "Oh, do you want a copy?" And I'm like, "No. Can you give me an electronic copy?" Because, I'm just gonna walk you around my
I will say my best Christmas gift was I got a giant poster of me and Tom Holland side by side together. So
well, that's different. But I'm gonna walk you around my basement,
because
right?
we look identical, apparently.
Oh, you do look like Tom Holland. And look, you can see.
You should see my Tinder. It's just nothing but me and Tom Holland photos.
Oh, that's
I
well,
was
yeah,
I was doing a social experiment, and that's how it turned out. Dude, I'm getting a whole tour of your house right now.
yeah. Well, my basement. I think we'd all swipe right in Tom Holland. But so this is the pile of paper I have left. A lot of them are comics journals and some books and stuff, paperback books. But like I will tell you, when someone dies and you have to take care of, you know, cubic yards of material objects,
Oh, I know.
that will do it for you.
That's how I got interested in JFK.
Yeah, that will teach you. I don't want to have any of that stuff in my house.
I
You know,
like
and,
this stuff.
well, yeah, but again, I'm thinking of the Swedish death cleaning because
Oh,
I had to do it for my parents, and I don't want my kids to have to do it with me. And so, um, it is, I collected comics for years, and I appreciated them, the smell of them, and the materiality of them, and um, but I've moved away from that, and I'm happy that we have digital access to media now. Um,
but don't you miss out on the smells and the nostalgia aspect? Like, there's a big market for nostalgia. I don't think you can get that from just watching something. You have to actually have the feeling of it.
you can't, and it is a different relationship. And to me, the freedom from the burden is is worth it. But you know, there still is physical, although not everything is physical media now. But people can have their own relationship. Um, I just, like I said, my thing about that was tossing my mom's house into a dumpster and just realizing that I didn't want to have that relationship with with media anymore. But also now there's so much, you know, you're thinking about numbering. Um, Comic book numbers used to mean something. If I say, "Oh, the Fantastic Four #1," okay, you know what that means, right? Except, do you? Because how many Fantastic Four #1s are there?
I don't know. Apparently, it's Fantastic Four is in the name. Now you're telling me there's only one. I'm just joking.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what I mean, that because they start over and renumber, um, it it kind of destroys that relationship uh with that history and the sort of materiality of it in the actual, physical thing. Um, because now there's so much more stuff. So, you it used to be, not to be an old man about it, but you'd have to go find things, and it was, the finding of the thing was sort of built into it, and now the joy of it, and then holding it and having it because it's treasure. Um, and I think it goes back to a deep sort of hunter-gatherer thing where you actually had to go out and look for things and find them and bring them back and display them. And um I have, like, I bought some art. I went to a conference in Cleveland several years ago on Wonder Woman, and we went to comic book shop, and there were local artists, and I bought some of their local art, and it's on my wall in my office. This weird Spider-Man wooden thing, and some other stuff, and that as art is interesting. And I actually am gonna hang up some of I have some of those big, those Treasury edition comics. I'm gonna put some of those up on my wall in my office and stuff. But um so having a physical object has a value. Um my kids still like to buy books. I feel every time they buy a book, it feels weird to me because I am thinking about, my next 40 years. 58, I probably got about 40 years left. Although, if you go that,
You're gonna die in 2039. We all
I
know.
know. Why do you say that?
I just got a feeling.
That's not 40 years. No,
You're
my
not gonna
dad,
make it till we reach the singularity. I'm sorry.
oh, I am. I'm going to
I
be
saw your
85.
Twitter post from like 2020, whatever it was.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
like posted 5 tweets up about, oh God, I'm not gonna make it to hit the singularity if I die in 2039. I guess some app told you that. And I was just dying laughing. I was just dying laughing. I was like, that's how I think of shit.
Yeah. No, I completely forgot about that. I'm not on Twitter very much. Um, especially now. But no, the goal is if you can make it to I think it's 2050 and in good health, then you'll live to be 150 or whatever. I'll be 85 in 20.
God, I hope not. I thought I'd be dead at this point. I just turned 26. That was the goal I was aiming for.
Ugh, I wish I was 26. But anyway, um, no, actually my dad just passed and he was 93 and his mom was 95 and I'm in better health than either of them. And so I stand a good chance of making it to 100.
Well, shit, dude, you can eat whatever you want. You get sugars, no calories for you. You just can't have nuts.
That's true. Well, I can have nuts, but some nuts, but not other nuts. But yeah, I actually have I actually have open on my this is too much for your audience, but um I have open the database of studies that are going on now, and I'm looking for obesity researchers to try to find somebody to harvest my gut bacteria and
Jesus,
develop it
man.
so into a cure for obesity and diabetes. So,
You're
yeah.
already thinking about benefiting society. If I were you, I was thinking, how many Reese's cups can I fit in my mouth?
Oh yeah. Well, although with that, how much money would people pay to be able to eat whatever they want to eat, whenever they want to eat it, however much they want to eat, or to not eat at all? What would people pay for that? All the money?
I mean, that's like there's an area of ADHD research where they're trying to figure out because for some reason, like I can have an orange after doing like 6 hours of cardio or something, and then I won't have to eat for the rest of the day as long as I'm moving and not thinking about it. And that's why ADHD also has like obsessive compulsive stuff when it comes to like you get home, you're sitting around doing nothing, you just start eating and you can't stop because your body's like, holy, we haven't eaten for 12, 14 hours. I could be hypermetabolism, man. That could be a good one.
Yeah, yeah. And I have friends that are like that won't eat. They'll just forget to eat for 2 days. My daughter's a bit like that. My relationship with that's really different. I think actually I have the best relationship with food, which is that I do whatever I want and it's all fine. Pretty far off comics though, but
Lucky, lucky.
yeah. 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 And that's why I'd like to make that available to the world. So if any of your listeners are gut bacteria researchers, we can make $1 billion.
Let's bring it back to the comics real quick on the beginning note. When it comes to what people are getting on the surface layer compared to what people are getting underneath, what can you show from your perspective in years of looking at comics and really being, I mean, surrounded by it, the whole culture in general, that you can really pull away a deeper layer of what people should be perceiving of a comics? Like if you watch a movie for the fifth time, M. Night Shyamalan, I keep discovering new stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's sure. I actually just got into The Thing from 1981 or 1982. John Carpenter's The Thing. Um, and I'm on Facebook with all these people, and I'm kind of shocked at the level at which people don't read, right? That all they want to talk about is the plot, and we really never talk about anything that's below the surface or is interesting in terms of the meaning of the work. But that again, it's true of everything. That I don't think comics are special in that way. Um, the difference with comics though, um, and and this is true of each medium, but with comics, the thing that I've learned in the past decade and a half or so is to read comics as comics. So the sequential artistry of comics, right? In other words, that the meaning is embedded in the relationships. Remember, comics are not words and pictures, they're relationships between intra-panel, inter-panel, panels on the tier, tiers on the page, pages and other pages. And being able to read into how meaning is created with the sequential artistry, right? That's something that I didn't do for decades, right? I only started doing it because I taught it. I taught a graduate course in comics theory and started to be able to do it. Now I can do it, and it's so much more. That's the thing that people that's what and it's also true with cinematic, like looking at camera angles and lighting and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole other layer of meaning. And the difference, I think, though, is that people recognize, say, literature, the words that are chosen, the sentences, the lengths of paragraphs, just all of that, all of the ways the rhetoric, the meaning is constructed through the art form. And that's what I think people don't understand about comics. Um, even so we had Ben Sawyer's a comics artist in St. Louis, and he teaches at Webster University. And I had him into my class. And I had trained my students to look at the sequential artistry, and we started asking him questions, and he was like, "Oh, oh, and we were saying, well, you did this, and we pulled this meaning out of it." And he went, "Oh, yeah, yeah, it's there." But he hadn't seen it before because he like a lot of artists, he does the thing that works. And they don't have to, no artist has to figure out why they're doing something, right? They just, if it works, then they lean into it, and the deeper meaning is there. But he changed the way he does his art after coming to class, because we made him aware of sequential artistry and that he hadn't been before. And it's not that he didn't understand it, it's just that nobody had gotten him thinking about it. And once we got him thinking about it, oh, he took off with it. Like, he got it completely. He understood it, and he teaches comics, and now but like nobody had pointed that out to him. Um, and that's the thing. So if you look at, say, Dark Knight Returns, right? Just to pick a big one. Say in my book, I talk about how it's a deconstruction of the superhero genre, and it is. But then when I read it by paying attention to the sequential artistry, I discovered that there's another meaning, and it's about the indestructibility of the superhero genre, that you can't kill it. You can't take it apart and make it not work, that it will come back. It'll come back in a different form. It'll come back as an SOB, a son of the Batman, rather than the Batman. But the superhero genre is there. And that is something that only happens in the comics. If you watch the animated version of it, it's not there, because it occurs through the one of the ways that it happens is that the only characters who get full page spreads are superheroes, right? So Batman and Robin, Superman, they get a couple of where they're the only thing on the page, or they're as big as the page, right? There's one person on the page. Nobody else gets that. All the TV boxes are really, TV screens are really small. So the only other character who gets anything like that is one of the SOBs. It gets a half-page spread. And the story ends with them in the Batcave, and Bruce Wayne Batman has become boss. And he's going to train them. He's creating another generation of superheroes who are going to be different, but they are going to be superheroes. So the genre, it's not death to the genre, and the same thing happens with like Watchmen, which I'm talking about because I've taught it so many times. And the relationships between the panels and the images and what repeats, and that it's a loop. It says in the comic book, nothing ever ends. You just take a break before doing it again, and you end focusing in on Seymour's shirt with the smiley face, and then you flip the book over and you have the comedian's smiley face, and it's the same image, right? And then you read it, and it's a big circle because you have to read it over and over again. Same thing is true of Mouse. I discovered in reading Mouse, if you look at there's a 3-panel zoom where it's the same image is repeated, and there's the death face is that characters who are going to die, Spiegelman draws them all in the same way. It's this, they're looking up, their little mouse heads are looking up, and he draws himself that way. And that changes the meaning of it. And there's a great bit, which when I first saw it, I went, ah! And dropped the comic book. It's the, in Maus, there's the panel where they go into Auschwitz, Arbeit macht frei. And on the next page, Artie's sitting there and he says, "Oh my God." And what happened was I tracked it, and the capital panel, right? The first panel of every page in the present was open. It didn't have a line on the top of it. It didn't have a border on the top of the first panel. And the ones in the past did. All of them had a panel, a border on the top of that first panel, that capital panel. And why? Well, it's because the present is open. We don't know the meaning of the present. This is Artie and Vladik in the 1980s, right? It's open. And also the pages were very uniform, sort of 2 columns, 3 tiers, 6 pages or 8 pages, very stable. Well, why? Well, because the present is unknown and it's stable. And you look at the past about the, period of the Holocaust, and that capital panel always has a line. And there's a lot of different designs. Why? Because it was chaotic, but past it's settled, it's closed. And when you flip from Arbeit macht frei to Artie sitting there, the capital panel on that page has a line on the top. Because you can't make poetry after Auschwitz. What it's saying is that the present is closed and settled by the past. That's why Artie's a mouse and not a dog, because he's a Jew. He is an American, but he's a Jew first, right? Americans are dogs, Brits are fish, the Scandinavians are reindeer, Germans are cats, Poles are pigs. And that line, right? That line sums up the whole book. And it is not present in the words. It is not present in the pictures. It is present in the relationship that occurs, that is built up over page after page after page. And learning to read comics as sequential artistry, that's the thing that people need to learn to, really enjoy comics. Because once I got into that, it changed the way I read comics, changed the way I enjoyed comics, changed my understanding of the stories. Marvels is the same way. Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's Marvels is that when I first read it, I thought it was this sort of, and it is, sense of wonder. You know, when Galactus gets knocked off and he stands up on the sky. Oh, it's just so it's real again. It brings me back to when I encountered it the first time. But I noticed that there was something that they did, which is that well, one thing is that the human beings are presented in in horizontal panels. And the Marvels, Submariner, Human Torch, are presented in vertical panels, right? Because they're different from us. Marvels are different from people. And when Captain America comes in, he gets a horizontal panel. Why? Because he's like us. That's in the story. You know, he's one of us. And then the next panel where you see the Submariner and the Human Torch, it's also horizontal. So that's interesting. But then there's also this thing that I call the three-panel decline. And if it were musical, it'd be dun dun dun. It's three vertical panels, and they're going diagonally down the page to the right. It's dun 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 dun. And you know, it ends with Danny Ketch, the kid on the delivering the newspaper. And when I read it, I hadn't been reading Ghost Rider, so I was unaware that Danny Ketch was the, you know, grim and gritty Ghost Rider. And you see the sky, you know, you see this cloud, and it appears that the sun is coming out from behind the clouds, and that this is, you know, this is Phil is passing on, you know, his sort of photography career to his assistant, and he's going to write a book. And, you know, he's just proved that Spider-Man didn't kill Gwen Stacy. And, you know, it seems like the sun is coming out from behind the clouds, but it's not. It ends with Danny Ketch, who is just about to, you know, he's a 11-year-old kid, and he's gonna very soon, you know, this is 1973. It's not going to be that long before he's the Ghost Rider and burning people and, you know, sending them to hell and so forth. And so what I thought was this celebration of superheroes and a sort of rebirth of the medium, which it was, and of the genre. It's also, superheroes are bad for us, is what Bert Busiek and Ross seem to be saying. They're definitely bad for the world that they live in. You know, dun dun dun. And it's the sun is going behind the clouds because we're about to go, you know, into the Iron Age. And that, I think, gets at, is an answer to your question, a long answer to your question. But um, in terms of people reading, that unless you understand the medium that an artwork is in, you really can't understand it. And so you do need to know about shots. You do need to know about diction. You need to know about rhythm for poetry, and camera angles and so forth, and shots for cinema. And you need to understand sequential artistry in order to read comics.
Do you think that people understanding that will emphasize more on, I guess, relating to the supervillain? I mean, I find that supervillains, I don't know if it's because I'm maybe doing more evil shit now that I'm older, but I find them more relatable, especially with the pain that they go through. I think we really see a person, or was shown in the past, at least through films, is that you have this psycho, twisted person, like take the Joker, for example. But then if you see, like we talked about last time, the Joker movie, it kind of people felt it was a little bit more relatable because you got to see the buildup of how he became this horrible figure that we've always known as being the bad guy. And I'm seeing that now, even with like Suicide Squad and other films that come out. You're finding it, people put in hard positions, obviously made bad choices in life, but necessarily not redeemable. Like I had to change my characteristics when someone says this person's unsavable or unredeemable. I was like, I think everyone is. I was like, there's got to be a point for it.
Well, I think that's a larger thing about sort of enemyization or otherizing. You know,
Communism.
yeah, well, that's the thing. It used to be that it was fairly simple, and
He's wearing red, shoot him.
so, yeah, exactly. That you could, that there were the enemy was created from, you know, ethnicity and ideology and so forth. And then I gave a talk on this about vampires. Is, you know, there's a shift took place in vampires, and it's what I've called internal enemyization. Is that, you know, it used to be that the enemy was primarily an other, right? And then with say the Vietnam War, the enemy became Nixon, right? The establishment, like that part, but also from that side, the enemy became young people and the counterculture movement and so forth. And now the thing is that the enemy is within. And so like the greatest threat to America, right, is the Republican Party. But from their side, they would say the greatest threat to America is wokeism. So that the enemy is no longer external to the society, it's internal. And I don't know if that's something that happens generally with societies, or if it's something that happened, to the US, or if it happened to the US and other places. That's a bigger question than I can answer. But in the US, um, because the enemy is other people in the US, other people in our cultures, other Americans, it it does two things. One is it makes it more difficult to have villains. One of the reasons that so no, no, Kamal Nuan, no, I'm sorry, I can't.
Kamal
I know.
Nanjiani
I've said his name many times. Yeah, exactly him. Um,
taking steroids to look that good.
Yeah,
How do you lie about it?
Kamal, Johnny. Yeah, that was odd. I don't know if he took steroids or if he
He
just got.
100% took steroids. He admitted to it later.
Oh, that's
I work in
stupid.
the fitness industry. That guy shaped up for his age that quick. I was like, hell no, that's unrealistic.
I thought that was the miracle of Marvel. Oh well, you
Muscle
know.
suits, man.
Yeah, okay. No, I just mean like the idea of like well, like Hugh Jackman, and I maybe Hugh Jackman took steroids too, but
He's still
um,
on them.
but what it looked like when he and Chris Evans when they built those bodies, like and Kamal actually that was an interesting thing because like he seemed to presage the idea that anyone can get in shape if they're going to be in a Marvel movie. You know, and Rob McElhaney though, I think Rob McElhaney is an example of somebody who does it honestly because he, on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he had seasons where he was jacked, and he also had seasons where he was, he put on 25 pounds and he was pudgy, and he did it for his character, But I think he actually did it for real, but I don't know.
He's on T Booster too. Well, that's the thing is that a lot of the stuff that used to be demonized of taking steroids, they're so good now that at least in my industry, everyone's pretty open about it. Like it's so common. It's like I had 5 friends last year alone towards the end get boob implants. And I was like, that was always, I thought like you never do that. That was just a horrible thing. Like it's like, oh my God, she got what? But now everyone's all like, oh yeah, I went up a size. I was like, well, I guess we're just talking about it normally, but all actors now, like even Jensen Ackles did it for real, but he didn't get super lean like how you see a lot of these guys do. They look like it's edited CGI wise, but I think everyone's pretty open about it now because you still have to work hard to get that body. You can't just take steroids and it magically happens.
Right, right. Um, Yeah, huh. But what Kamal Nanjiani said was that, he couldn't get cast as a bad guy. Because, that's one of the reasons why he liked doing Chippendales, the movie, because the TV show, because
Yeah, I
he
was
got to
thinking
play a
something
bad guy.
else.
And, that wouldn't, there would have been a period where he would have only been playing bad guys, right? Where he'd been playing, terrorists and so forth. And then there became a sensitivity to the issue, and the pendulum swung pretty far the other way, according to him. But that's the thing is that you can't have you can't now have an enemy that is defined by identity because we have people who have all these identities, out and about who can now say something, and that's good. It means that it changes storytelling, and but it also there's also lazy. I always find it funny when you see some giant corporation release a movie where the villain is a giant corporation. Um,
Ready
you know,
Player One?
yeah, yeah. Well, almost most most movies that have bad guys, especially guys, are it is corporations in some way, which is funny because it's like the same thing happens with white men can be the villains now. Well, because we've had thousands of years. Well, we've had hundreds of years of being the hero, and so okay, we should do that. But but the idea that people, who hold minority identities can't be automatically othered and turned into villains mostly, um, is I think good. It makes it more complicated, and it also makes it easier to see the lazy storytelling, right? That at one time,
Tilt your screen up real quick. I'm getting like the upper part of your nose.
oh, okay, oh, sorry.
You're good.
Um, I'm just
You're making a really good point. I just want to make sure you're actually like in the shot for it.
sorry, I'm thinking. I do that when I think. I look up. Um, I did that in class one time, and I looked down, and all the students were like, because they had not. I had just gone off on a tangent, a good tangent, and they could just barely follow me where I went. But your point about the Joker and being more understanding is that because of our greater awareness of identity issues that have come about because people with identities have been able to, take pride in that identity and take pride in resisting oppression. Um, Storytellers can't simply just turn them into, cartoon villains, as it were, except corporations. But even when they do that, unless they do it well, just seems like crappy storytelling. Um, but it also opens up more possibilities, you know? So I think that's true we have so much culture now, and in some ways we have so much crap, and like movies now are not kind of the dominant art form of storytelling because the financial investment in a movie means it has to come back, and like I look at it and I tend to only go to the movies to see the big stuff, right? Anything else I'll probably just wait till it comes on TV. Why? Because distribution. It all goes back to distribution, right? And that shapes storytelling, and it always has, and always will. And you can I think what happens is people get attached to the story. The golden age of science fiction is 12, right? The things that you're aware of when you kind of became aware, those become the norm for you. But they're totally different now. I just look at a lot of storytelling that I'm writing a novel, right? And it's a novel, but like that board game that your friend has come up with, right? That's part of that storytelling. Or trying to think of how can I tell this story through like news reports. People who get Dracula like one entry at a time. And Dracula was written, they had the super high technology of the typewriter. Nina Harker is typing up all their notes and then sharing it and so forth. And you see that as a technology, an internal technology to the story of its own storytelling, but it's told that way. And so you can get World War II day by day on your phone and experience it that way. Um, and people doing, like you talked about YouTube shorts. I have people I follow on YouTube who I can't even find their regular page, or they're not even producing um videos that are longer than say 3 or 4 minutes. It's just like I see the bit and it's cut up into these little chunks, and I'm like, I'd like to just watch the 8-minute video of it, and there isn't one. They are 2-minute videos. And so the range of storytellers, like there's a group on YouTube called Content Machine. It started as these two guys, and they tell stories, what it's like to be in their 20s today. And then they have a number of actresses in there and other actors, and they built their own little studio. Um, and you know, maybe there's money behind it or whatever, but it, this is true in general, that the amount of talent there is out there in people's ability to produce art and culture and commentary. I mean, look at what you're doing, right?
I don't have talent, sir.
Yeah, well,
I'm hanging on by a thread, my guy.
but still, you're producing, you know, commentary, right? I'm not, except by being on your show. Um, and that didn't used to be true. You know, the thing you're talking about, like making board games, and people do have to, you know, do this level of work where they're doing it all the time, and everything is promotion and everything is connected, and they have to do it, you know, they produce it as a YouTube thing, they produce it as a podcast, and then they have to have an after show and that, but they're able to do it. And you know, nobody's making very much money at it, but enough people are making enough money at it that they can do it and make a living. I watch a YouTube channel called Some More News. Guy Cody Johnston, he used to be part of used to be part of College Humor. And you know, he has his own little thing. I know him really well. Other people don't know him at all. And my daughter just told me about somebody dropping off of YouTube. He'd been on YouTube forever, and my reaction to that was, YouTube isn't forever. I remember when YouTube started, but all these people were in their sort of fan group. All these people were really upset that this guy was dropping off YouTube because he had been such a long-standing portion, you know, part of their life. But he's been around for whatever 10 years. But you know, when you're 17 and you've been watching somebody since you were 7, that's significant. And that is true now of comics and everything else, that more people can make more stuff. And we lack a unified culture. You know, if you were going to sing TV show theme songs, you could sing the ones from the 70s, but you couldn't sing one from anything now because one, TV shows don't have theme songs, but also because think about all the shows that you haven't watched, right? And it's hard. You can find a piece of culture that you share with somebody else, but maybe only one, you know? Um, and and that is the sort of DC and Marvel model of the, you know, universe, um, in terms of the comics, is based upon that older distribution based idea of a shared kind of unified stock of culture that comes at us. And that's not true anymore. And that, you know, it just is something people have to adjust to. And but the great thing about it is, um, you know, for younger people, this is, you know, for my kids, there always was the internet. You know, I existed before the internet. I remember when I got my first email address. And you know, for you, you existed before the internet too, although not much, right? Like there was probably a period when you discovered it, and it just kind of came in. But for people not that much younger than you, it was always there.
When I discovered it, the next day they made Safe Search, and I was like, damn.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? And so it's that what I mean is that, really with comics, and I mean it's the same as it ever was, but it's also different than ever was.
Would
It's the same
you
as it was in that these things have always happened. Change of medium and distribution, um, has always happened, and it's changed the way art is made and experienced. And there isn't any one way to do it. And also, you know, you retain the old forms. I mean, look at the way audio has come back. Um, you know, thank you, Steve Jobs, right? Like iTunes which I don't even know exists anymore. That's what gave us, why do we call it podcasting? Because of the iPod, right? And and now look at, look at how many people get to make podcasts. And most of them don't make any money. The same thing with most actors don't make any money. Most writers don't make any money off their art. But a few do, and you kind of have to have the mass. It's kind of like my theory of Nike owes every basketball player money because it's only because 1,000 kids play basketball in high school so that 100 can play it in college, so that 5 can go on to the pros, so that one can have a career that lasts more than a year. Well, without that 1,000, you wouldn't have the one. And so the same thing is true of all the arts, that it's only because we have so many that the good ones can kind of rise to the top, or there's so many that are good. um anyway, I'm just kind of rambling, but
Well, can I ask you, do you feel like that through all your experience with comics that has showed you a different perspective and outlook on life a little bit, or given you a different understanding? Because you can get a lot of perceptions about life through any angle you come across in one's life. That's why so many people are so diverse in their ways of thinking and the ways that they look at things. But I'm curious if you consider it a benefit that comics, this whole path
yeah,
you've taken.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and again, that's one of those differences now, I think now, is that when I read comics, got started rather reading comics and so forth, and then it became an identity, and then there was fan activity, and it was, looked down upon, and that uh disrespect, produces a kind of paradoxical or reaction of pride, uh that I don't think that happens now, right? Part of it is the geek revolution. um, the thing that I got out of comics, I don't think people can get out of comics now. I find it hard to think of, a medium or an art form that's really looked down upon, because anybody can find a whole group of people now that appreciate and enjoy an art form or a genre, and can kind of, immerse themselves in that world. Whereas in the past, it wasn't as possible to be immersed in one of those worlds and just kind of ignore the outside world. And that's, for me, so for reading comics, it was that, it was this identity and a way of thinking about myself. I was a comics reader, that I think is different now. And I think it's better that things are more open, but
Well, if you're
it
reading off of a device, nobody can tell what you're reading, so nobody even
right,
knows you're a
right. Yeah,
comic book person.
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah,
But then it's also cool to be interested in comic book culture. I don't know how many people I come across with Dragon Ball Z material, or they got something on a tattoo where I'm like, that's Dragon Ball Z. They're like, if you know, you know. And then they walk away. I'm like, all right, I got it. I know what that is.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and although there's, with that, it's funny because in a sense that's gotten so big and people don't even necessarily know, and they buy t-shirts or whatever, they don't really know what it is. But there's so many niche fandoms that people have and have access to, that they do have that sort of insider thing. Again,
I met the love of my life in a Walmart wearing a Dragon Ball Z t-shirt. I went up to her and I said, "Oh my God, Dragon Ball Z." And she goes, "Huh?" I go, "Dragon Ball Z." She's like, "I got this at Hot Topic." And I go, "No, no, no."
exactly. And the thing is, that, like, this is true with comics, is people spend more, going to one comic book convention like San Diego or like that, than they're going to spend on comics the whole year. Or, more, as was always true, t-shirts and sheet sets and so forth sell more than comics. One of the things that I think that would be if our corporate overlords could listen to this. This is something that I heard about in Taiwan from John Lent, who's a comic scholar. Um, he said that what they do there is that the comics are integrated into the other media, so that a story will start in a comic book, move into TV, move into a movie, and then move back into a comic book, right? That there it's seamless. And if you look at the um the constant adaptation. I just watched Sweet Tooth, which started out as a comic adaptation, and Umbrella Academy, and like Umbrella Academy on TV is far better than the comic book is, right? But it wouldn't exist without the comic. Or The Boys, right? The Boys on Amazon is a far better show than the comics were, right? The comics are kind of crappy, but the TV show is great. And so what
Because
our
there's
corporate
realism in the boys.
Yeah. What our corporate overlords need to realize is that comics, especially, and this is something different about comics, um, comics, they should basically not worry about whether comics make any money. I mean, they kind of probably don't, but that comics themselves shouldn't be viewed as a profit center. They should be viewed as a loss leader for storytelling and creativity. And they should, just be paying people to make comics, which maybe you're going to sell, maybe you're not going to sell, but that then are available to be adapted into other things that actually do make money, you know?
It's
But
my only
without,
problem with wokeism in comics or in films in general is that I know some people go, yeah, should put more identity in films. I do agree with that. I just don't believe the companies that are doing it. I think it's like a false, like, oh, we're going to make money off of doing this and doing this. And I'm like, I didn't go see Miss Marvels. It's not because there's women in it. It's not that at all. It's just I don't know those characters. I want something. I saw the Madam Web trailer that's supposed to be coming out. That looks fan-fucking-tastic. But also, Static Shock, one of my favorite superheroes. Donald Glover, get him on it. That's a perfect fit for that guy. Or God,
well,
what's his name?
it's
He's
not
in
plain Static Shock though, because he's a teenager and Donald Glover isn't.
Donald Glover can pull it. Just shave the beard. He's got baby face. We're all
But
good.
yeah, yeah, no, I know what you mean.
But who's
And
the guy who's in all those? Oh my God, he's be perfect for Green Lantern. And I'm blanking on his name right
Nathan
now.
Fillion?
Huh?
You mean Nathan Fillion?
No, 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 no,
Okay.
no. He was in Suicide Squad. He was the main guy.
Oh, you mean John Cena? No, no, it's not.
The
You
guy who
mean
played Deadshot
I played oh, I was
or
thinking
whoever it is.
I played Rick Flag.
Yes, he would be perfect for one of the Green Lanterns. 100%. There's not even a question about it. I'm waiting for it. Marvel, come on, get on it, or
Idris
DC,
Elba would
whoever.
be perfect for anything though. So that's
That's
not
true. That's very true.
that's that's not really about Green Lantern. That's really
But
about it.
there's so much of a market there where I go, just do that. Like I think a lot of people, like if you see Captain America, you just want Captain America. It's why people rejected the TV show or the movie version where they brought back a different Captain America because you were so adapted to Chris Evans, and there was this phony Captain America. And like for me, I was like, I didn't even bother watching the show because I didn't want to see a whole nother remake of Cat. I want one person. That's it. Just someone I can connect to for my whole life. I just started liking Michael Keaton's Batman because I saw The Flash. Fantastic movie. I thought it was funny that to show that he was running backwards in time, he ran backwards, which I just thought that was hilarious. But Michael Keaton's Batman, I never knew that Batman. I didn't like him when he popped up on the screen. But then I started to like him throughout the movie. I was like, this is awesome. He's seasoned. I like it.
Well, this is something that's different about superheroes actually than other characters and other IP is that so the way I phrase it is all Batmen are Batman. In other words, that there's so many different versions of Batman, right? But they're all equally Batman. And you might like one more, like one less, but you can't say one is more Batman or less Batman. I have a little talk on this. And so you have your Batman, you have the Batman you like the most, or the Batman that brought you in. But then, you can experience the other ones and appreciate the other ones. And the superheroes, because the suit, just put on the suit, it does the acting. Um, that they're much more malleable than others. So like if you do a Sherlock Holmes, it will always be compared to the original stories, right? Because there's a set of stories, there's a canon of stories. Or when you adapt Little Women, it'll always be adapted from the thing, but the book, the novel. But superheroes, they just draw on the whole history, and there's not any one true version. It's just a matter of how well it's interpreted and done. And that's why you can have, one of the mistakes that DC, I think, is finally getting over, um, is you can have multiple versions, right? You can have Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson be Batman, and the audience gets it. I think they underestimated their audience's intelligence and ability to follow things for a long time, and maybe they're finally getting up to the point where they can just let us have all of it, you know?
I think the multiverse opened up doors, but I also think now it's a great way for them to cover up whenever their actor gets a scandal about them. They're like, it's okay, we're going to replace him, and it'll be the multiverse because there's billions of worlds.
It's true. It does allow that, but that's really just an expression or an extension of something that was, inherent to the genre anyway. I mean, once they got, like, even if you look at, like, right from the beginning, right? Superman was in the comic books, but he was also in the newspaper, but he was also in the Fleischer cartoons. And each one of those is a slightly different version, but they're all Superman. Um, and so that was true of, Batman changed over time, but he was always Batman. And then once you got the Flash of Two Earths, you literally had different Flashes, and people just went with it. It goes back to, myth. There's all these different Hercules. There's these different versions of the Trojan War, uh, Arthurian, there's Parzival and Parsival, and, Arthur and Arthur. And um, people are always capable of that. I think that one of the interesting things about the explosion of culture is the way in which at least some creators and producers have learned that they can trust their audiences. Their audiences can figure things out. That in some ways, while big entertainment hasn't gotten kind of simpler, um, although in some ways not, it's also gotten more, there's a lot more complexity out there and variety. And bringing it back to comics, that's my, Scholastic is the top comic book seller, which I think is great because, you know, comics are not about any specific companies. Comics are about an art form, and that my kids getting into comics however they did, and now they're making their own, and their pages are kind of small, but that's because, they're doing it on the iPad, and they don't think about double page spreads the way that I do, having grown up with it. But, I think that, again, to bring it back to distribution as I do, that it will, we will get different forms, and then the storytelling will change. And, I miss stuff. I miss the kind of unity. When I started reading comics in 1974, I was able to read back to basically 1960, and it was all one story, and that maintained through the mid 80s. And I think that's a mistake that the superhero publishers made. I think they should have tried to keep that together, but that's not, that's not your experience of superheroes, and you still like them. So there's
Man,
not like
it,
one way to do it,
if you
right?
would have been, well, I guess if you wouldn't have chose comics to get interested in 74, you could have just been interested in Watergate, and we would have had a whole completely different conversation. I would have had it on here for something else.
One of my memories of that time, two memories of Watergate. One is that we my parents were out and we needed a lot of fire, so we just used the newspaper and we burned the Nixon resigns newspaper. The big in like I think it was red, is like this big in red font, and my mom had wanted to keep that. Um, but the other one was I was at friend Steve Sandomirsky's house. I was actually just there for my 40th high school reunion. His dad, Frank, who was a college professor like my dad. Anyway, and on the TV, the adults were really worried because there was this gate, right? And it had all this water behind it. And they were worried about, they kept talking about the water gate, right? And it was I thought it was gonna break like and flood. And we were all gonna get flooded because the water was gonna break through the water. That's literally what I thought Watergate was when I was, 8 years old, 9 years old. I thought it was the adults were really concerned about this flood. So,
That's interesting. Yeah, my show's been largely focused on the 60s and 70s, uh, largely Kennedy stuff and Nixon stuff. Where, I mean, I don't know, it's a fascinating time period for me. That counterculture is really something. I really enjoy the artwork that's on there. If you know who Abe Peck is, he wrote for the Chicago Seed that had some of the best artwork on the counterculture. I had him on the show to talk about it a little bit, but damn, the way that people can express their creativity to me is what's fascinating. I think you still see that with comics today. I just wonder if it's going to, the essence of it is getting diminished and if it's going to be lost in the future, even with the medium changing.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of
Because the
there's
counterculture of the 70s ain't the counterculture of today. A
no,
tweet does not hit the same as a magazine.
but it can't be. I mean, there's the thing, and this is probably a
It could.
fake, but
It could.
somebody translated there's an Aristotle thing where it's either Aristotle or Plato saying kids these days. Ugh. You know, um and and you know, there's also this is from I think Aristophanes. It's from a Greek playwright, and it was basically like, oh, things were good back in the days of Marathon. We were united, the Battle of Marathon, right? And so, the good old days are always about 40 years ago, but I'm old enough now that I remember 40 years ago. And so I had students say like, oh yeah, I'm really into the 80s stuff. And I'm like, oh, because I remember when that came out. And what I think about that now is when Happy Days came out in the 1970s, right? That was only 20 years away from the 1950s, which meant that my dad, who was, in the 70s, like in 1975, he would have been, let's see, 1930, he would have been 45, right? And that meant that Happy Days was about the time when he was 25. And, you know, 20 years ago now is it's the aughts. It's not that long ago. Um, and so that past always seems to, I don't know, be kind of far away, and things have changed. And of course, the world is always getting worse. But you know, I watched a lot of crap and read a lot of crap. I went back and I was going to read through all the Spider-Mans on an app, and I just got into it. I was like, these are bad. And it was from really about the period. The reason I started when I did is I started like, well, when did I stop reading them? And I started from that point and read forward, and I was just like, these are just bad. Like these aren't good. And that's why I stopped reading those, because I wasn't enjoying them. They were not good. And so, you know, people are people and stuff will come and go. But in a sense, our relationship with art will always be what it is. We enjoy it. We get passionate about some of it. We ignore other parts of it, but it will change. And but if it didn't change that, so I don't think there's any, things do change and things do go away, but I don't think that it's bad. I mean, you can miss it, but there will always be sort of the true thing there. Um, there will always be people making comics who get it, and there will always be people making comics who don't get it. But Eh.
Mr. Now, I enjoy your perspective. It's why I wanted to have you back on here again. But is there a place where people can find your links, Mr. Coogan?
No, I'm not particularly active on social media or doing anything these days. I've got some projects that I'm working on that hopefully I will be. But I mean, I'm on Facebook, but not for any particular thing. I do have the Institute of Comic Studies on Facebook, but I'm not
I
super active.
follow.
Yeah, I'm not active on it. So, but
And
I kind of have an idea that there's a bunch of things I'm going to do, and I hope, and I've been going to do them for at least like it for about the past 15 years. And so, hopefully I'll get to that. If I don't, though, it's okay because who do you remember from 100 years ago, right?
Da Vinci.
Yeah, it's right from 800 years ago, like one person. So eventually we all pass, and that's okay.
Jeez. And then on a high note on that one, but I'll link your book links in there. And obviously, if you get one of your projects done, I'm happy to have you back on to discuss some
Yeah,
more. But
I'll when my book comes back out, I'll be happy to come back on and promote it.
well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.